discovered my cheating spouse's secret Reddit accounts, divorced him, and ruined the AP's marriage. Have you ever thought you knew everything about your spouse, only to find out they were hiding a secret life right under your nose? I thought my marriage was solid, until I uncovered something that shattered everything I knew. It all started innocently enough, with a random notification popping up on my phone. A Reddit post. The username seemed oddly familiar, and out of curiosity, I clicked on it. What I discovered left me breathless. It wasn't just one account, it was multiple. And these accounts weren't innocent at all. They were filled with explicit confessions, intimate conversations, and hidden relationships. My own spouse had been living a double life, and to make things worse, his affair partner was someone I knew. But this was not where it ended. What followed was the destruction of not just one marriage, but two. Stay tuned to hear how I uncovered everything and what happened after. I met my husband, Dan, in college. We were both young and ambitious, eager to take on the world together. Our relationship progressed quickly, and it wasn't long before we moved in together and eventually married. Our life seemed picture perfect. Dan was a successful professional, and I had a rewarding career of my own. On the surface, everything was great. We had the kind of marriage that others admired, always the couple others looked up to. But, as we all know, appearances can be deceiving. We didn't have any major issues, or at least none that I knew of. Sure, we had the usual disagreements here and there, but they never seemed serious enough to threaten our relationship. Or so I thought. Over the years, Dan and I became comfortable in our routines, and I felt secure in our marriage. I never suspected anything was wrong. In fact, Dan had always been an attentive husband, and he was someone I trusted implicitly. I thought he was the kind of man who would never cheat. I never had any reason to question his loyalty. But everything changed one evening when I happened to glance at his phone while it was left unattended. There was a notification from Reddit. At first, I dismissed it as a simple curiosity, but something in me made me click on it. I thought maybe it was a post related to his work or something he was interested in. Little did I know, this would be the beginning of my discovery of a side of my husband that I had never known existed. For years, Dan had seemed like the perfect partner. He was loving, kind, and always seemed so trustworthy. His family and friends adored him, and I thought we were building a life together that would last forever. I never imagined that behind the perfect image, there could be secrets so deep and hurtful. What I uncovered on his Reddit accounts would change everything. I found messages, interactions, and evidence of behaviors I never could have imagined. I could not ignore it and I had to know more. Dan had always been a private person, which I appreciated at first. It made him seem mysterious and intriguing. However, in hindsight I began to realize that this privacy was more of a mask. He never shared much about his personal feelings or past relationships. Even when we had discussions about boundaries and trust, he would always brush off concerns, assuring me that I had nothing to worry about. I believed him. After all, why wouldn't I? We had been together for years, and I trusted him with my whole heart. We often joked about how predictable and routine our life had become, but I was content with the stability we shared. The idea that there could be anything lurking beneath the surface never crossed my mind. It wasn't until that fateful day when I accidentally stumbled upon his Reddit accounts that my entire world came crashing down. It was as though everything I thought I knew about him was a lie. The posts I discovered on those accounts were unlike anything I had ever imagined. The messages, the interactions, it was all so carefully hidden. The thought that he could be involved in something so secretive, especially behind my back, was unbearable. Dan's charm and the way he made everyone feel comfortable, especially me, had always made him seem like the ideal partner. I never imagined that something as simple as browsing the internet would be the key to uncovering the truth. The Reddit accounts were filled with private conversations, some of which involved intimate details with other women. Some of these women were clearly not just friends, they were more. The posts were seductive and flirtatious, and there were even mentions of meeting up in person. My heart sank. Could it be possible that I had been living in the dark all these years? I couldn't just sit idly by. I had to confront this head-on. But what did I want to uncover? What was I hoping to achieve? Answers? Closure? Or perhaps justice? I did not know yet, but I knew one thing for sure, everything was about to change. It was late one evening when I first stumbled upon the Reddit notification on Dan's phone. We had just finished dinner and were lounging on the couch, watching a movie. Dan got up to take a call, and as his phone sat unattended, I caught a glimpse of the screen. Normally, I would not have thought twice, but for some reason, that notification grabbed my attention. At first, I debated whether to even click on it. The rational part of me said that I should respect his privacy, but the nagging feeling that something was off wouldn't let me go. I clicked on it. What I found was far more than I expected. The notification was from a Reddit thread he had been active in, one about relationships. Initially, I assumed it was just a casual conversation, perhaps a group discussion or some work-related banter. But as I scrolled further, I began to see posts and comments that made my stomach turn. They weren't just casual exchanges, they were deeply personal and, in some cases, inappropriate. Dan had been leaving comments on posts about infidelity, relationships, and, more alarmingly, flirting with women in these threads. I clicked on one of the threads that caught my eye. It was titled, "Looking for a Little Distraction." The post was written by a woman named Lily, and she described herself as someone looking to meet new people and experience new things. Her words were flirtatious and suggestive, something that should have been the first red flag. But it was the comment under the post from Dan that really struck me. His comment was playful, yet intimate. He didn't just give a simple response, it felt like he was engaging with her on a deeper level. He asked personal questions about her life, her likes, and even subtly mentioned a meeting up sometime soon. It was clear that their interaction had moved beyond just an online exchange. It felt more like a dating app conversation, except this was happening on Reddit. I could feel the knot tighten in my stomach. Then I scrolled further. There were other posts, all of them more damning than the last. One thread was titled, "Anyone Ever Gotten Caught Cheating?" In it, Dan shared a personal story, though he did not directly mention me, that made my blood run cold. He wrote about a time he had been involved in an affair and how he had managed to keep it a secret. The way he spoke about it was detached, almost as if it was a casual experience to him. This wasn't the man I had known. This wasn't the man I had married. I kept scrolling. Each post, each comment, seemed to dig a deeper hole. It wasn't just the tone of the conversations, it was the sheer amount of time he had been spending on Reddit. As I read through more of his interactions, I started to recognize patterns. He had been talking to multiple women in these threads, some of whom seemed to be more than just casual acquaintances. They were speaking with him in a way that suggested they had met before, that there was some sort of established connection beyond the digital space. I was sickened, but I could not stop reading. I had to know everything. The threads were riddled with flirtatious comments, private exchanges, and even explicit conversations. It was clear that this wasn't just some innocent pastime for Dan, this was a full-blown affair. The Reddit account wasn't the only thing I discovered that night. In his messages, I found detailed plans. He had been arranging to meet one of the women, someone he had been messaging for months. There was even talk of traveling together, sharing a hotel room. I was shocked. How had I not noticed any of this before? How had I been so blind? I felt betrayed, devastated, and utterly crushed. The trust one had built with Dan over the years had been shattered in an instant. I stared at the screen, unable to process the full extent of what I was reading. How could he do this to me? How could he pretend to be the loving husband while secretly engaging in these affairs? I tried to control my emotions, but they were overwhelming. I had spent years building a life with Dan, believing that we were in it together. Now I was faced with the truth, I had been living in a lie. It was almost surreal, like watching a movie. But this was my life, and I had no choice but to confront it. At that moment, I knew I had to take action. I could not let this go. I had to confront him, but first, I needed more evidence. I knew that in order to fully understand the extent of his betrayal, I would have to dig deeper. I started searching for every thread, every interaction, and every piece of evidence I could find. I wasn't just going to catch him in a lie, I was going to expose everything. I was no longer the wife who believed everything was fine. I was the woman who had been lied to, and I wasn't going to sit idly by while Dan continued his deceit. The truth had come out, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. The Reddit accounts, the messages, the lies, everything had been uncovered. The discovery was just the beginning, and I knew I had a long road ahead of me. The weight of the discovery was almost unbearable. It was clear now that Dan had been living a double life. He had pretended to be my loving husband while secretly seeking validation and connection from other women. But the most painful part was how deep his betrayal went. I had been so invested in our relationship that I had never considered the possibility that he could be hiding such a massive secret. The night I discovered everything, I was in a daze. I sat there, staring at the screen, rereading his messages, trying to make sense of it all. I was devastated, but I was also furious. How dare he? How could he deceive me like this? My trust in him had been shattered beyond repair. There was no going back after this. I decided that I had to confront him, face to face. I wanted to see the look on his face when I exposed everything. I needed him to understand the gravity of what he had done and the pain he had caused. The next morning, when he came downstairs for breakfast, I was already waiting for him. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I kept my composure. I was no longer the wife who had blindly trusted her husband. I was the woman who had uncovered the truth, and I was ready to fight for my dignity. "Dan," I said calmly, my voice unwavering, "we need to talk." His expression was confused at first, but he sat down across from me. I could see the tension in his shoulders. He must have sensed something was wrong, but he had no idea just how wrong it was. "I found your Reddit account," I continued, staring him in the eye. "I found everything. The lies, the messages, the plans. I know about your affair." his face drained of color, and for a moment he was silent. I could see the guilt and panic in his eyes. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. "I never thought you would be capable of this," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I never thought the man I married would betray me like this. But you've crossed a line. There is no coming back from this." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. I wanted him to feel the depth of the hurt I was experiencing. I wanted him to understand how much he had broken me, how much his actions had destroyed everything we had built together. He finally spoke, his voice soft and filled with regret. "I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I don't know what happened. I was just looking for something. I don't know what." I shook my head. "No. You do not get to make excuses for your actions. You chose to do this. You chose to lie to me, to cheat on me, and to throw away everything we had. There is no sorry that can fix this." I paused again, trying to steady my emotions. I had been through so much in the past few hours, and I knew that this conversation was far from over. But I also knew that I needed to take control of the situation. I couldn't let him manipulate me with his empty apologies and excuses. The truth was out, and it was time for him to face the consequences. "I want a divorce," I said, the words coming out more firmly than I had expected. "And I want everything. I'm not walking away with nothing. You don't get to walk away from this unscathed. You will feel the consequences of what you've done." Dan's face fell. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. "Wait, what? You can't be serious. You don't want to throw everything away over this. We can work through it. I swear I'll do anything to fix it." I stood up from the table, my resolve strengthening. "No, this is not something that can be fixed. The damage is done. You've destroyed any chance we had. I am done. And as for your affair partner, I'm going to make sure she feels the consequences too. You don't get to ruin our lives and walk away without facing the fallout." Dan looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You can't do that. You're going too far." But I was already past the point of caring about his feelings. The man I had married was gone, replaced by a stranger who had betrayed me. The man sitting across from me was someone I no longer recognized, and I wasn't about to let him get away with it. "I've already contacted her husband," I said, my voice cold. "I want him to know everything. I want him to understand the kind of person he's been living with." Dan's face twisted in horror. "You don't have to do that. Please don't. This is my fault, not hers. She didn't know what she was getting into." I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. "Don't try to protect her now. She was an active participant in all of this. She deserves to know the truth just as much as you do. And you deserve to lose everything for what you've done." The conversation ended there. I walked out of the room, leaving Dan to process the devastation he had caused. The next few days were a blur. I filed for divorce and made sure to include every bit of evidence I had gathered from his Reddit account. I made it clear that I would not settle for anything less than what was rightfully mine. And as for the affair partner, her marriage was destroyed just as I had promised. Her husband left her, devastated by the lies and deceit. I didn't take any joy in it, but I felt that it was necessary. She had crossed a line, just as Dan had, and she needed to face the consequences of her actions. The divorce proceedings were difficult, to say the least. It was not just the emotional toll of ending my marriage, but the legal battles that followed. Dan fought me on every front, trying to keep as much as he could, even though I had all the evidence that would lead to my victory. But it was more than just the legal issues. It was the aftermath of discovering his betrayal and the impact it had on my life. As the days went by, I began to feel a sense of relief, even though it was overshadowed by the emotional scars. Every time I saw Dan's face, I was reminded of the man who had deceived me. But as I focused on the future, I realized that this was my opportunity to rebuild my life, to reclaim what was rightfully mine, and to heal from the damage he had caused. I had always prided myself on being independent, strong, and self-sufficient. But when you give your heart and soul to someone, when you trust them completely, it is easy to forget the power you have within yourself. Dan had taken so much from me, but he had not taken my strength. If anything, his actions had only made me more determined to move forward and create a life for myself that was free from lies and betrayal. One of the hardest parts of the aftermath was dealing with the way others saw me. Friends, family, even coworkers, seemed to have their own opinions about my marriage and the divorce. Some thought I was being too harsh, too unforgiving. They didn't understand the depth of the pain I had experienced, or the damage Dan's betrayal had caused. But others supported me, telling me that I had done the right thing by standing up for myself, by not letting him get away with it. I knew deep down that the right decision was to walk away. Staying with someone who had betrayed you was never going to lead to happiness. There was no going back, and I had no interest in trying to fix something that had been broken beyond repair. I had already given Dan too many chances, and he had thrown them all away. But as the divorce moved forward, I began to see that there was something more to this story than just my relationship with Dan. The aftermath had a ripple effect on those around us. His affair had ruined more than just our marriage, it had impacted other people's lives as well. His affair partner's husband, who had been devastated by the truth, was left to pick up the pieces of his own shattered life. As painful as it was for me to watch, I could not deny that his world was now forever changed. In a strange way, I felt sympathy for him. He had been lied to and deceived, just as I had. He had trusted the wrong person, and now his life was falling apart because of it. I knew that my actions, exposing the affair, had played a significant role in the dissolution of his marriage. And while I did not take pleasure in seeing someone else suffer, I knew that I had done the right thing. Truth had a way of cutting through lies, no matter how painful. But there was also something satisfying about watching Dan's life fall apart. He had built this world of lies and deceit, and now it was crumbling down around him. His reputation, once so carefully crafted, was now tarnished. His friends, his family, they all knew the truth. They knew what kind of person he really was. I had made sure that everyone in his life was aware of the betrayal he had inflicted upon me. And I knew, deep down, that this was the kind of justice I deserved. As for me, I focused on healing. I took time for myself, spent time with the people who cared about me, and began to rebuild my sense of self-worth. I wasn't the woman I had been before the discovery, but I wasn't the woman who had been hurt and betrayed either. I had learned from this experience, and I was stronger for it. I enrolled in therapy, not because I felt broken, but because I wanted to understand how I could prevent something like this from ever happening again. I needed to understand what had gone wrong in my relationship with Dan, and how I could ensure that my future relationships were built on a solid foundation of trust and honesty. I also began to pursue hobbies that had been put on the back burner for far too long. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones, and focused on the things that brought me joy. It wasn't easy at first. The loneliness was overwhelming at times, and there were days when the pain would resurface. But each day I grew stronger, and each day I came closer to finding the peace I had longed for. As for Dan, he eventually accepted the divorce. He had no choice. His lies had caught up with him, and there was nothing he could do to fix what he had destroyed. I knew he was hurting too, but I no longer cared. He had made his choices, and now he had to live with them. Years later, I would look back at this time in my life and see it as a turning point. It was not the way I had hoped my story would unfold, but it was the way it had to unfold. I had lost my trust in love, but I had gained something much more important, my independence. I had learned that I could survive without someone who was not worthy of my love, and I had learned that I could rebuild my life, no matter how far it had been shattered. Have you ever been betrayed in a relationship, and how did you handle it? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you found my story relatable or inspiring, please do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you do not miss any future content.